Commission meeting to order. This is Wednesday, March 18th. This is our regularly scheduled meeting. I guess for roll call, good evening. I'm Mayor Alice Norris.
Brian Shaw.
Don Slack.
Rob Crocker, Commissioner.
Graham Peterson.
Doug Neely.
Rocky Smith, Commissioner. Jim Nisita.
And welcome to Graham. This is your first evening on the Urban Renewal Commission, so we're glad to have you with us. The first item on the agenda is to ask you if you have items to put on future agendas. It's one of your opportunities. You have, of course, others in between too. Jim.
I actually have an issue with the current agenda, and I wanted to propose moving item 3D down to the end. And the reason is I'd rather have a briefing on the ODOT appeal project and the status of the Cove project before considering $10 million in line of credit. I would like the informational background before.
Okay. Larry?
We're not ready on 3D. Actually, that's been moved back to the meeting of the 1st.
Okay, that's been scratched, so you got your wish. Rob.
I'd like, frankly, many of us are new to urban renewal anyway, and I know we've kind of talked about this.
Urban Renewal 101.
Right, yeah, having an urban renewal 101 for everybody. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what urban renewal is and isn't, not only in chambers here, but in the general community, and I would really like to see a work session or something where we can have an urban renewal 101.
Let's see if we can shoot for sometime in April, and I'll see also if I can round up a couple of urban renewal experts that might be able to share with you some opinions. That way you won't just be hearing from me on that issue. So.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
That is if I can con them into doing it for free.
Yeah. I've been talking to our city manager about doing that, so I agree. I think that's a very important thing for us to do. Anything else? And again, you can propose items at any time by calling in. Next, we have the elections of officers. By our bylaws, we were supposed to do that at the first meeting of the Urban Renewal Commission in the new year. We forgot, I think. So now is the opportunity that we will take to do that. And in the bylaws, it says that the officers of the Urban Renewal Commission shall be a chair and vice chair. Officers can be members of the City Commission, but at least one of these officers during any given term should not be a City Commissioner. So we elect the chair and the vice chair, and then the executive committee is made up of the mayor, the chair, and the vice chair. When we had citizen members previously on the Urban Renewal Commission, it was great to have a chair that was a citizen member. So it made a nice mix. And since I appreciate that many of you have talked to me about continuing on as chair, but since I serve in the executive committee anyway, I think it'd be great to have a citizen member in that position. So nominations are now open for chair of the Urban Renewal Commission. Commissioner Crocker.
I'd like to nominate Don Slack for chair of the Urban Renewal Commission.
It's been moved and seconded. Don Slack. Are there other nominations?
I just want a procedural
Commissioner
clarification. The bylaw says that we're governed by Robert's Rules of Order, and Robert's Rules of Order doesn't require a second for a nomination.
Right, it doesn't, but
Okay.
it's fine. Second is just beyond the call of duty.
Right.
So there are others.
I'd like to
Commissioner Smith.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Nisita.
Okay. Would you be willing to accept? Okay. Are there any other nominations? All right. We will vote. So I guess I'll ask Kelly to.
Wait, I'd like to read my campaign statement.
I think that's not necessary. We all received it in the mail. Would you call each member's name then, and we'll declare our vote? Thank you.
Commissioner Neely,
For Don Slack.
Commissioner Smith,
We're voting.
You're voting.
On which one?
Either one.
Or both?
You.
Okay. Commissioner Nisita.
Commissioner Nisita,
Commissioner Nisita.
Commissioner Crocker,
Commissioner Slack.
Commissioner Peterson,
Commissioner Slack.
Commissioner Shaw,
Commissioner Slack.
Commissioner Slack, Sorry.
Commissioner Slack.
And Chair Norris.
Commissioner Slack. The vote is 5 for Commissioner Slack, 6 for Commissioner Slack, 2 for Commissioner Nocita. So congratulations, Commissioner Slack. I shall pass you the gavel, and you may continue on with the rest of the meeting.
Okay, nominations for Vice Chair.
Commissioner, Chair Slack, I nominate Commissioner Rob Crocker.
Rob Crocker, do you accept? Yeah. Commissioner Nocita.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Walters if she's interested.
I apologize for being late.
Okay, Commissioner Walters is nominated.
I'll second
Are there any
that.
others?
Second?
Don't need a second.
Okay.
That was a
Pointed out.
point by Commissioner Nocita. So. Did you want to take the roll call, please?
Okay.
And it's Walters and Rob Crocker.
Commissioner Neely,
Commissioner Crocker.
Commissioner Smith,
Walters?
Commissioner Nocita,
Commissioner Walters.
Commissioner Crocker,
Commissioner Crocker.
Commissioner Peterson,
Commissioner Crocker.
Commissioner Shaw,
Richard Crocker, please.
Commissioner Slack,
Commissioner Crocker.
Commissioner Walters,
I guess Commissioner Crocker seems to have the votes.
and Chair Norris.
Commissioner Crocker.
So that, I guess that's 7 for Commissioner Crocker and 2 for Commissioner Walters. Okay, let's continue on the agenda here. Discussion items. Consider decision on windows at New City Hall.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Slack and Urban Renewal Commission members. I'm Scott Archer, the Community Services Director for the city. This is something that we've talked about a little bit before, but we didn't get to finish the conversation, I think, at our last meeting. So won't go into a lot of detail. I've provided you a brief memo of the issue in your packets, and also a memo from me, and then there's a memo from Christina Robertson Gardner in our planning department regarding this issue. This is something that you, the Urban Renewal Commission, previously asked staff to go forth and work with the Historic Review Board and asking for their input on the design of the new City Hall building. The recommendations of their review are in Ms. Gardner's memo, which is explained in detail, and essentially the outcome of those recommendations are that the city would consider, or that Urban Renewal, because you're the funding agency, would consider replacing all of the existing windows with more historically correct windows that are compatible with the McLaughlin Conservation District. This is not required. The building is not in the historic McLaughlin Conservation District. It's not a designated building, but it certainly is your option to consider that. The funding, as outlined in my memo, the funding impact, the difference of replacing those windows to the standard that's been recommended by the Historic Review Board would be approximately $58,000. That includes the actual windows plus a little bit of design and consulting services with our architecture firm. So that's my report back to you from your previous direction. And basically, staff is seeking your input and your direction as to whether to expend these funds to implement those recommendations or to not.
Commissioner Neely.
It's a fairly expensive fit, and I recognize that. However, it is the first thing people see coming up Singer Hill is that facility. I mean, and in a sense, it is a gateway. You've got the McLaughlin neighborhood sign right in front of it, and I think that alone would be a basis for me supporting it. But also, I think it indicates that the city supports such renovations on non-listed structures were in this neighborhood, and I do support that. Even though there's no specific requirement, I think we're essentially setting an example perhaps for future redevelopments in that area, so I actually support it. I don't know that operable windows are necessary, because really I don't want to say it's a facade, but it gives it the appropriate look. I also think that maybe operable windows might negate some of the possible energy savings that might occur when you're heating and your air conditioning and so on. And the fact is, if we go for LEED certification, there will probably be very rare occasions, if any, where you would open such windows, because you've got really a controlled system in I don't know that we're seeking certification, but we are trying to meet those standards, and I assume that normally people don't open windows and doors under those kinds of facilities. That was a recommendation, I think, of the Historic Review Board, and that recommendation I would not support.
Commissioner Crocker.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I don't know who to direct this to, but it seems like these windows that are in there now are brand new. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is this $58,000? I mean, would that be better spent on either some other part of this building or somewhere else in urban renewal funds, or can we even do that, I guess is the question.
I think maybe you answered your own question, but
I guess the question is, can we say, look, that $58,000 is probably better spent doing 6 new building facades on Main Street?
well, yeah, it's $58,000. You do not have a problem with the windows; they are brand new. It's a question really whether you want to replace those with the historic-looking windows. Is there a benefit for that? You know, that's something I think that you have to judge and make that decision. So, and if you don't spend it, can you use $58,000? You can always use $58,000.
So it isn't like
I really don't know how to answer the question.
well, so it isn't like this money can only be spent on this particular project. This is general urban renewal funds that can be spent on other areas.
We have in there, again, you've got a debt limit of $130 million. Now, that's a good question that you probably won't spend all of that, so because some of these projects may never come to fruition. You have in the plan $10 million that are earmarked for Civic Center. And again, we were going to split that between possible library costs and City Hall. So anything we spend here will reduce the amount that you have for the library. Now, again, if you don't spend the $10 million for both of those, yeah, you could redirect those dollars elsewhere. The other question that, and Scott, you can kind of help me here because I don't remember all this discussion. I think when all's said and done, we probably will seek LEED certification because I think it has to do with how you probably want to talk about that building somewhat. This may be a wash if you had operable windows. Commissioner Neely raises the issue about energy thing. I think you probably have an issue too with disposing of brand new windows and replacing those that may come into play there as well. So again, it's really a question. It's more of an aesthetic thing and how comfortable you feel with what goes there. So,
Commissioner Nocita.
Mr. Archer, a couple of questions for you. Are you aware whether the existing windows would have a resale value? Can you put an ad up on Craigslist or something and figure out how much you could get for the existing windows to kind of mitigate the sticker shock on the replacement windows?
We asked our architect that question, and they weren't sure. It's not. It wouldn't be known until we actually went through the process to put them out, for some kind of sale or whatever. But it may be a possibility.
Okay.
But we don't know the amount. We don't know how much we could recoup back of the additional.
I mean, I would obviously want, given I'm a former HRB member, I would want to see that building restored to its original historic integrity. And there's a lot of stuff that was done, contrary to that. And I'm just wondering if it's been calculated whether a number of things might have resale value that might lower the hit. For example, that portico thing that's, on the front, could that be disassembled and sold? Or I don't know. And I'm just wondering, is that something that could be considered?
I'm not, Commissioner, I'm not sure about that, simply because that's not been posed to us before. I know there's been that discussion in the HRB that, the building has changed significantly with its historical, look and so forth, but we haven't gotten to that level of discussion, so I really don't know whether those have any value or not. And, we've been moving forward in the design with just under the assumption that apart from this recommendation that the exterior of the building basically looks like it does, and that we're designing the facility more from an interior kind of a look to make it suit the City Hall purpose.
That might help me with the question then, because to me, the value in investing in the new windows would be because they would be historically accurate. And if the overall plan for the building is not, because of expense or otherwise, to invest to return it to its historic integrity, I'm not sure I see the value in investing $58,000 to, only have a little piece of that historic process or that historic integrity restored. So if we don't do it holistically, I'm not sure just investing in windows to make that piece a little more historic makes sense.
Commissioner Smith?
I have some of the same concerns on this one. I'd want more than anything to see that building the way it was. And I think by replacing the windows, it shows us going in the right direction, but I think we made a few wrong directions before that, even though we bought the building after the redevelopment. But I kind of feel the same way. I mean, if we put money into making the windows, it's still not a historic building. It's still not back to where it was. And this is a tough one. I'm really sick about it every time I drive by the building, the way that it looks and the way that it looked before, and how I mean, it's still beautiful now, but the historic character of it is gone. I think the windows are a great thing, but it's just one little piece that I don't know helps all in itself. I guess that's it. I just look at this letter from staff, and there's so many important key points to this, and just that line that says underscored, at this point the board doesn't even view this as a historic building. We all know it's a historic building, and it's an embarrassment that it was not part of the inventory, and so I think we're partly responsible for the situation that we're sitting in as a city. It's kind of an embarrassment to have to put money into something we already spent money on.
Commissioner Shaw, did you have your hand?
Yeah, and that previous commissioners have kind of taken the wind out of my sails here, but what started out as one of the best examples of colonial commercial architecture in the area is now turned into a traditional contemporary colonial structure. Arts and crafts, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so whatever we do now, I don't think even if we put the windows on there, I mean, obviously we would see it coming up the hill, and you could see a couple nice windows there. But if you look at the front of the building, and you're going to see that contemporary awning coming out with these nice new windows, I think now there's going to be a different play going on here with these historic windows on there. So. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate because I think when I was involved with the Historic Review Board, we had to oversee any new construction or additions in the district, and this would have been overseen by the Historic Review Board. Even though it's not a designated structure, it's a structure in the historic neighborhood. And we would have had to oversee this, and this wouldn't have happened. So my thought is that it's, I don't think the windows are going to bring this back to the colonial style that it was, so.
Do we have any public opportunity here? Or we don't have any? Okay. Anybody else? Larry?
I think one of the issues, again, the windows are a different issue, but I think if I recall, Scott, and correct me if I'm wrong, to restore that to its historical construction would also involve doing away with the dormers,
Right.
which would involve actually negating the second floor as a use as it's proposed. So I think we'd probably be relooking at really what that building could be at that point.
Yes,
So
that's
you get into a much broader issue if you get into that question.
Commissioner Norris?
Well, I think I agree with all the direction of the discussion, that our options then, I think our options are two. If we wish to spend the money to make it historically accurate, that's one thing. We also need to spend an additional money to make it LEED certifiable, which I thought included operable windows, but
not necessarily.
Not
It's-
necessarily,
yeah,
okay.
that depends.
So it seems to me that, I don't know that we get both with the financing options that we have. So it seems to me that our options then are limited to go the historical route or go the LEED certifiable route.
Are we ready for a motion? Oh,
Give a third?
Commissioner Walters?
Well, since staff has to live there, do they have a preference that you would like to express? Is there a consensus opinion among staff?
Not necessarily. We haven't. We've been more
Given-
discussing the interior. The real focus is the design of the interior, where it needs to suit the use that we're trying to find, and so that's really been the staff focus.
Okay, thank you.
And then, not to your question, Commissioner Walters, but to Commissioner Norris, the part about the LEED certification and the windows being operable or non-operable, we haven't answered that question yet. So I want to make a clarification so that the commission doesn't think that has some part of your decision making. We're just getting into the checklist of what it takes to be LEED certified and what we need to do. And we've discussed the pros and cons and the LEED standards of operable versus inoperable. So it doesn't, the historical windows and the LEED don't necessarily tie together, though they ultimately will, but that's not it's a separate kind of an issue.
Commissioner Norris?
Just a quick response, I suppose, to finish up. I would love for it to be historically accurate and LEED certified. That would be like my ultimate objective. However, if I have to make a choice, from what I know and have toured in other buildings, and most recently would be the City Hall in Hillsborough, that the LEED certifiable things make a healthier staff. That their sick rate has gone way down. The allergies that staff have had in the building have gone way down, and so I guess I would argue for health if I have to make that choice.
I guess that's not the choice, really. The choice is whether, to the degree that this fix is one that brings it back to something that looks better enough to make a difference.
Do we have a motion?
I move, I don't know how exactly to make the motion, but I move to decline spending $58,000 on the windows at this time.
I would like to make a second motion. That
Wait a minute.
We have a second? We have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a first, being a motion and a second, and you want to repeat your motion again? Which was, it was basically to decline purchase of the windows for the City Hall. So, you want to have, we'll have discussion, go ahead.
I wanted to propose that we add a condition that if it's determined at a later point in the, in your investigations, that it would be desirable, that it would be nice to be able to reconsider the question again.
I accept that amendment.
Okay,
to
thank you.
my motion.
About the second. Is that okay with you?
I'll accept it.
Okay, then we do have an amendment to the motion that if something comes in the future that we want to take a look at this related to the lead or other issues, that we could bring it back here to the commission. So, does everybody understand the motion? Call for the question.
Commissioner Neely,
No.
So you're voting, okay.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita,
Aye.
Commissioner Crocker,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Slack,
Aye.
Commissioner Walters,
Aye.
and Chair Norris.
Aye.
That was incorrect. It's Chair Slack. It might take us a while to get used to that. Huh? Me too.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, if I could, we may come back to this point. Once we go through the lead certification, if we are short on the number of points we need and this issue will push us over, then I think it will bring a lot of validity to spending the kind of money to push us over that. We're not going to know that for a couple months yet, but we're in the process of looking at those issues.
I sense we're ready for you to come back if that's the case. Our next item on the agenda, Amtrak Station Purchase Proposal.
And Ms. Crushhour is going to present that.
Minutes?
Oh, minutes.
No, I've got the amended one, doesn't have minutes. No. Okay, Commissioner Shaw?
I'd like to abstain from this since know the owner and his bodyguard back there.
Mr. Fowler?
I do have an idea on those windows, by the way. I'll talk to you later. Maybe just an exterior facade.
Foliage.
Give me one, John. He's good.
I know the owner too, but I'm not.
Well, and I will say, we haven't talked about this proposal, but I respect anyone's.
Does anybody know Dan Fowler in the room? Please stand up now. Good evening, Chair Slack and Commissioners. I am pleased to give you an update tonight on the Amtrak station. You all know that in 2003 we built the platform and the driveway and the stormwater improvements to the Amtrak station. And at that time, we purposefully delayed constructing the parking lot and moving the depot over because we were hoping to get regional funding. A little bit of background, and I handed out my notes so that you can have them and follow along if you like. Tonight we're here to update the Urban Renewal Commission on the status of the Amtrak station project, and then hear any discussion and answer questions. And then we will want to get direction from the Commission on whether or not you would like us to continue with the next steps. In the Amtrak station, the story of it goes back quite a ways. Back in the 1990s, the region conducted a study to determine where would be a good location for another Amtrak station that would serve the southern metro region. As you all know, there's the Union Station is up in downtown Portland, and then it was believed that it would be very desirable, rather than people having to go all the way to Portland to catch the passenger rail, it would be great to have a station that would serve the South region and southern Clackamas County, for that matter. And there were three locations that were studied intensively. One was Milwaukee, one was Canby, and then Oregon City, and we were found to be the preferred location. And after that process, or possibly along the same timelines, Urban Renewal was purchasing up some property down in that part of the Urban Renewal District, one of which was the site where the Amtrak station is today. That, for those of you who don't know, is a former Stimson lumber site, and it was riddled with a number of environmental problems, including PCPs, polychlorinated, this is a hard one, I'll come back to it.
Piece of cake.
Anyway, we worked with Stimson over a long number of years to get a closure on the groundwater contamination at the site, and then with the understanding that we will continue to keep that site kept so that future contaminants couldn't get down there and contribute to more contamination, et cetera. That's a little bit of a sidebar, but you probably got to know that. Another one of our special properties in Oregon City. Then, as noted, I think I have a 2004 here. Actually, in 2003, we used urban renewal funds to construct the platform and the little entryway there so that people could start using the station. The ridership has been fairly good. I think the ridership will be even greater when we get a parking lot constructed there, and certainly when we get a depot building there. And over the years, we've long considered moving the historic freight depot, which was originally in Oregon City, down to this site as just a great way to preserve a little piece of history, move it down the street a little bit, but use it as the ultimate depot at the site. And that depot was actually located down near about 16th and Washington, between Washington and Main Street, a number of years ago. It ended up getting transported to Portland, and actually the owner, Dan Fowler, can give you a much longer story than I'm going to give you about it if you ever ask him. And then ultimately, I believe he purchased it and brought it back to Oregon City to its rightful home. And I mentioned earlier that we thought it'd try to be appropriate to get some regional funding to build the second phase of the project, because it's supposed to be a regional station. And as a regional station, try to get some regional funding for it. So we made a couple attempts to Metro to get flexible funds for the project. And I think it was at the second attempt we successfully obtained about $900,000 from regional flexible funds for the phase 2 of the station, which at one point in time it was phase 1A and 2, and now we're just calling it phase 2 because it's really no point in splitting the project up any further. And you want to just hold it up a little bit so they can see that, John. John Burrell is our project manager on this from my department. And so as you can see, we constructed the platform and the entrance with phase 1, and then phase 2 will be a depot building and building the parking lot. And we've given you a copy of that as well, so with two sides on it. So one, you can see how does that building fit on that site, because we have to deal with the floodplain down there, get it above the floodplain. So that's a bit of history about the project. I mentioned we received the funding from Metro. The project is actually slightly more than $900,000, but we also, in getting the $900,000 from Metro, we offered I should have looked it up, but approximately a $300,000 or $400,000 local match, which helps compete for these flexible funds because it shows you bring a leverage to the project and the money can get spread more throughout the region. That money is supposed to be spent in the 2007 to 2009 time frame. We have a little bit of leeway just because we did some creative fund transfers in using that money on the McLaughlin Boulevard project, which is a complete ODOT federalized project, and then we can just use urban renewal money now then, so we transferred our urban renewal money over to the Amtrak site, which really cleans up a lot of the red tape and bureaucratic hurdles you have to follow in using the federal funds. And it was approved by Metro. Everything's copacetic. It's just the color of money is slightly different, but we still need to honor the time frame to a certain extent. So in our budget, in the urban renewal budget, and in our work plan, we had proposed to get very active back on the project to try to get it constructed in 2009. And over the years, we've been conversing with Dan Fowler about how could we acquire that building, and he has tenants in the building right now, which they've been loyal tenants for a number of years. For now, we might as well keep them. We don't have another plan for that building right now. Of course, that's not my decision to make, but if it's an income maker, it's something that I would recommend the Urban Renewal Commission consider maintaining those leases until we have another use for the building. And so over the last couple of years, Dan and I have had many meetings and have talked about what kind of an arrangement might be a good one for both the city and his company in transferring, in the city acquiring the building, and then, you know, what's in it for him as a developer. So there's another piece of property which, John, you want to point to it on the big map there? There's a piece of property which we call the GrowCo property because GrowCo Landscaping leases it right now, right? And it's a small property just to the southwest of the existing platform. And we purchased that. David Wimmer, you might help me with that the date. I think we purchased the GrowCo site in 1998 or something, about then. With that in mind, thinking that it would be really a good idea to try to consolidate properties in that area. At that time, we thought we might use the GrowCo site for the Amtrak station. At this point in time, we've opted not to do that. Instead, we've decided to we instead decided to use the parking, put the parking to the northeast of the station instead. And so here's the platform. So here's the entrance to Amtrak, and here's the GrowCo site. We also, the Urban Renewal Commission also owns this property right here, and what happens with that is something that we may end up talking about additionally with Mr. Fowler later, but isn't something that we're proposing this evening. But as I show you up here, the parking lot we've chosen with the Amtrak station to shove to the back of the parcels so that we don't have a parking lot up against Washington Street. We preserve Washington Street for commercial or mixed uses, and then have the parking lot towards the back, which is closer to the platform anyway. It's a better layout. So that being said, having met with Dan Fowler a number of times, we have talked about transferring the depot building to the city. Mr. Fowler owns. Owns this property right here. So Mr. Fowler has an interest in acquiring the GrowCo. Has an interest in acquiring the GrowCo property because it would allow him to consolidate properties. It makes it a much more developable site. The welding business in front isn't quite really big enough to do a lot of redevelopment with. So this would make a good parcel for redevelopment. And then the other thing that we've been talking about in terms of an agreement would be for Mr. Fowler's company to move the depot over onto the Amtrak site and do the site improvements and construct the parking lot. Though the one thing that, from my perspective, we wanted to talk about is making sure we have make sure we're getting a good deal for all that construction, and to make sure that we are allowing contractors in the community to not feel like they didn't have an opportunity to competitively compete, to competitively participate in the project. And we want to make sure we're looking after our taxpayers' dollars. So that's something we've discussed at length as well. And so far, the basic outline of an agreement that we have talked about is indeed transferring the transferring the GrowCo, transferring the building, having Mr. Fowler's company, which is experienced with all kinds of historic remodeling and reconstruction, having them basically be kind of a general contractor for moving the depot over to the site, and We have asked to have a transparent process on bidding the larger components of the parking lot construction and site grading, those kinds of things, where he would need to get 3 competitive bids for the larger portions of that contract. I believe that kind of a process would still require an exemption from public bidding laws because it's a little different from our typical laws, and we would be asking your permission to seek something like that as well, not until we have the final arrangements of the contract or the agreement worked out. There are some other things too. We talked about that we have a lease on the GrowCo side, and he's got leases in the depot building, and we talked about transferring those leases to one another. And we also talked about stipulating a maximum profit overhead for the general contractor so that that the city felt like that we had gotten a deal that we agreed to on the project from the get-go. Dan, do you have anything you wanted to add right now, or we can all open it up for questions? I could also tell what the next steps are.
I think I would just maybe add that I think Nancy portrayed it well. We would have a very, very transparent process as a general contractor, and completely would agree to at least 3 bids in each category of work, calling out our overhead and profit figures so that it's really an open book and bidding process. I don't have any problem with that. It's I have maybe a few other things I can mention, but I'll maybe wait for some questions.
I also wanted to point out why would I feel like this is a good idea? And I think the most important thing is the logistics of doing this project. Dan is so familiar with that building. He's moved it once. He moved it down to Oregon City. And he's also familiar with his tenants, all of those logistics with keeping them happy during construction. But it's also to bring in a separate complete contractor to do the parking lot. I can see significant logistics problems, and I can see potentially higher costs. Shuffling people around the schedule, I think, would be difficult to coordinate. Just the use of the site itself, because we have to still respect Clackamas Landscape Supplies needs down there. They have a lease as well. So to have one general contractor manage the parking lot and the depot site itself, I think just makes things, we're far more assured of a smooth process and quite possibly a better value in the long run. So the next steps that we would propose would be to get the appraisal on the depot building. We've already gotten appraisal on the GrowCo property. One of the decisions that needs to be made is exactly how do we move the building and what does that foundation look like, and that's something that was going to be a next decision. We didn't want to spend too much time studying that any further until we have some direction from the commission, and then we would complete a final set of plans for the project, record drawings, and also something to be used during construction, and to get competitive bids, and then we naturally need to complete a development agreement so all of the responsibilities and roles are spelled out clearly and the obligations are understood. So if there are questions.
Okay, Commissioner Nocita.
I'd like to ask some clarification on the use of the historic train station is to use it as the Amtrak station that we have.
It is to locate it there. For starters, Commissioner Nocita, I can see there have been all kinds of ideas that have floated through my space since I've been here in terms of what do we eventually do with that building. I think what's most important is to get it over on the site, and then
On the Amtrak site.
On the Amtrak site, correct. And then ultimately it's either a community or a city commission or urban renewal commission or somebody's decision to decide what it evolves into, what kind of use the actual building evolves into.
Okay. I'm not clear at all on what the sale of the GrowCo site has to do with that.
I think it's a the GrowCo site has benefits to Mr. Fowler in terms of consolidating his property. We had purchased it as an investment, as a piece of land in terms of our own consolidation of land down there and having control of the land in that area. And from my perspective, it's a parcel that isn't necessarily of use other than, in fact, for us to consolidate our Amtrak site, we don't need that parcel.
I understand that, but I don't see a relationship between selling the GrowCo site and
Let me try to
renovating the Amtrak depot.
let me try to clarify it as clear as I can. I have something you want, you have something I want. I think
It's pretty clear that way.
we have a depot the city, would like to move over and have a station out of, and there's some land behind property. We have the property totally surrounded. Why it makes sense? I mean that's just clear. And I don't mean to be flippant about it, but I think the prices of each should be appraised and should be treated fairly. And then what the result of that, I think, would be that the city would end up with a historic depot, and then what we would end up, the reason we want that property is it squares up the parcel there under one ownership. And then in terms of being able to redesign for high-density housing, mixed use, it just makes that function so much better. But that's really why.
The exchange could just be an outright sale as opposed to a land swap. We could just outright buy the
Absolutely, and
depot
maybe,
from you.
and that's maybe what will happen is that you buy us, we buy that. I think that'll be part of the
So
development
there's
agreement. That's correct.
it's not the only option.
That's correct. I think it's likely that it would be a sale and a sale.
Okay, Commissioner Crocker?
Yeah, I guess that was going to be kind of my question too. Is the values of each, if we're swapping, are they? Do we have appraisals on the GrowCo site and the? So to clarify, we're only buying the building. We're not getting the dirt under the building. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So I guess the values would need to be equal. In theory, they'd be perfectly equal. Or would there be some cash considerations back and forth, or how would that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith?
I have no idea where the GrowCo site is, and pointing it out on that map doesn't help me at all.
This piece
Thank you.
next to the
Right behind the welding.
Maps do no good without labels.
Commissioner Norris?
I know I haven't talked with Amtrak for a couple of years, but I guess maybe to clarify, because I know a lot of people in the community believed there was going to be a station with people in it where you went up and bought a ticket. And the last time I talked to them, it wasn't even going to be an automated station. So if you could clarify what you know about that. And then secondly, I didn't understand why we would need to ask for an exemption from public bidding.
Well, in terms of the station, Mayor Norris, I think a lot of ideas have been floated around. If Amtrak believes that will be a station with a person in it one day, we have to figure out how to fund it. And an automated ticket machine is probably in the long run cheaper to fund than having a staff person in there. However, there are a multitude of things that building could be used for. I think from my perspective, for starters, if it's a moneymaker and then it evolves into something that's more of a community building, that's great. But to just move it there and have it sit empty for a while we figure out how we're going to pay for whatever else happens there, I would recommend that you keep it being a moneymaker and recognize it is not permanent whatsoever, but it certainly is better than having it sit empty. And these folks have been using that building for a number of years, and they like it. I think, as far as I know, they're happy to move as long as it's kind of seamless. So that would be my reasoning.
Commissioner Neely?
Maybe a public bidding.
Oh, the public
Oh,
bidding?
sorry.
The state, or the statutes, OR 279, have specific processes you need to go through to assure there's that taxpayer dollars are spent carefully, that people are given an opportunity to bid on a project, and there's a couple of other. I think we'll leave this into the city attorney to answer, actually.
Yeah, and part of this, when the city engineer brought it to me with the idea that F&F would serve as a general contractor and that there'd be pavement involved, and anytime you have a public work, you've got to have competitive bidding. There are allowances for exemptions, and in part it's going to be determined by how things work out and who does what. To the extent everything's competitively bid, you may not need any exemption. But to the extent F&F takes it on because of their familiarity, then you're going to need an exemption because you're going with a sole source on a service. And just to that's exactly right. And to clarify, if we were the sole source, which it makes a lot of sense why, we are agreeing that we would take those major aspects of the job and still competitive bid those and show all those bids to the city. So and then call out our profit so that it's still really open book. So it's but that is the difference.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And Commissioner Neely.
Coming to Mayor Norris's first concern, I agree with you. If we don't have a use of it, we might as well get some money. But I do think we need to plan a use for it, and I think a transportation-oriented use for that building would be beneficial. I mean, you may have entities in Oregon City that are willing to actually have a business there and have their hours such that people can go in and procure a ticket, or if it's an automated system, the point is you do have a shelter there, but it's still exposed to the elements. I want to see an area where people are able to get out of those elements while they're waiting for the train. Obviously, it's got to be something that's supervised. You don't want it to be a place where people that are going to come in and sleep the night. You don't want to kind of have that kind of situation. But you may well have businesses that would fit and that would actually make part of their facilities available. I don't know how, in terms of what agreements are worked out in terms of current users, but I surely would not want to leave anybody with the notion there's going to be some kind of long-term use that's associated with the current use, because I think it's great having a building that looks like it ought to be there, but I think it needs to function in that way ultimately.
And just as your responsible public works director / city engineer, I would want to make sure we have funding in place for those purposes as well.
And just so you know, most of the leases are 1 to 2 years, so there isn't real long term.
Okay. What do you need from us tonight? Do you need Commissioner Walters?
So if an exemption is required for public procurement laws, is this body the source of the authority for that, or is that someplace else?
The City Commission is the local contract review board, but the Urban Renewal Commission is an entity unto itself, and I haven't looked at that specific question of who it is. It's actually a fascinating question. I don't know the answer to it.
It would be one or the other. So
or maybe both.
What we're asking for is direction to continue, possibly both, because it's urban renewal money, the match for the,
Do we need a motion, or do we just need consensus?
just consensus and
How's
direction to
everybody?
keep
Go ahead.
moving along.
Commissioner DeCita?
I'm just want to make sure that whatever we decide tonight is going to involve us expending any money on appraisals or anything right now.
Well, you have to do some, for us to do work, we have to spend money, even in engaging David Evans some more. So maybe you want to give us a limit or something.
I think what we're looking for is not a decision on the project, but if this concept is agreeable, do you want us to continue work on it? We are going to have to spend some money to do that, and I think appraisals are probably going to be part of that. But putting the rest of this arrangement together.
Well, and getting contract documents ready. And
yep. So that's what you'd be, I mean, if you need more time for us to get back together, we can do that. But
I'd need a estimate of what we're going to spend.
Well, let's see. An appraisal was generally for that kind of a building is probably in the $3,000 to $5,000 range.
The appraisal you're talking for the
depot.
And then you got to have one for GrowCo.
Wait. Why should we be the one paying for an appraisal on that building?
You're initiating.
Okay.
Well, I think for us to put together to continue discussions with Mr. Fowler and trying to acquire the depot building, which is something we want on our site, we need to take care of that business.
If I might, I think it's in our interest anyway that the appraisal come from us.
That's a good point.
I mean, I would hate to have you doing the appraisal on the depot.
Commissioner Smith, did you have a question?
Just clarification, was there already an appraisal on the property? I
The
thought
GrowCo.
that's what you said. GrowCo for the
On GrowCo,
property?
we have the appraisal. We do
Okay.
not have it on the depot building. And the other thing is we need for David Evans and Associates to put together some construction documents. And I would anticipate that that could be in the range of $20,000 or $30,000 at this point. And I don't have a firm estimate from them, but that's what I would give you as an estimate.
So we're making a pretty substantial decision then tonight, as far as,
Well, this has to be done. I mean, the project is in the urban renewal budget.
yes.
And all of these things other than, if we don't want to do the depot, well then, that
Okay.
goes off the table.
Well,
But we do need to,
I would
put
ask that
together
the
a set of
commission
contract documents.
not vote on this and continue it until we get a specific cost estimate on what this is going to cost us.
What's the commission's pleasure? What, do we need a motion?
I guess, I don't know if you're going to get a cost estimate till you actually bid it out for the appraisal, for one thing, but you've mentioned something that I would total up to be about up to 40 at the maximum.
possibly, yeah.
Well, the thing is, I think I'd be happy to make a motion to move forward with expenses dealing with all the things that we've been talking about, not to exceed $40,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to proceed with what we've been talking about with a number of expenses not to exceed 40,000. We have a second. We have discussion. Ready to vote?
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Nacita,
No.
Commissioner Crocker, Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
He abstained.
Oh, that's right.
Commissioner Norris,
Aye.
Chair Slack.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Walters, I'm sorry.
So what was that? Let's see, that's 8-1 with one extension. Abstention? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Resolution, Larry, consider resolution exempting design build contract of Hughes Construction for Cove Phase 1 and Phase 2 from the public bidding process?
Yeah, we don't have that ready for this evening as well.
Okay.
In fact,
So C and D are off the agenda for this evening. Briefing on the ODOT appeal of the Cove project.
and I'm going to call on Mr. Kabashman to explain that to you.
Good evening. As you know, the Cove project, the concept plan in Phase 1 and 2 of the detailed development plan went before the Planning Commission and was approved back in January. There was an appeal filed by ODOT on a variety of transportation issues related to the Agnes approach and also McLaughlin. And after the appeal was filed, the city and ODOT have been in discussions trying to see if there's a way to deal with the issues that they raised outside of the land use process. And essentially, about 2 hours or so ago, we finally came to the final terms on a draft agreement, cooperative improvement agreement that would affect those two areas. Some of the key pieces would be to ensure that the developer of the Cove would pay $100,000 towards the improvements on McLaughlin. That if Phase 1 of the Cove project is constructed, that there would be a traffic control device, gates or bollards up on Agnes, because part of it would be to construct a one-way road to from Agnes and to put a gates and bollards up. And let's see, there are a variety of other pieces in that, and the the appeal hearing was originally scheduled for this evening's City Commission meeting, and the staff report has asked for a continuance on that until April 1st, and this will hopefully be considered by the City Commission tonight, the agreement. So, Commissioner I'm sorry.
Commissioner Neely.
Sorry, I know.
I probably shouldn't worry about this until we see it. You say a one-way road, and I don't know that those are useful unless there's another way road to get out of it. But anyway, we'll be informed of what that is ultimately, I guess.
Any other questions? Is this for information, or there's no decision on our part? Thank you.
Unless you have any questions or concerns about it, be a good time to discuss those as a group.
Commission?
If I might, it's just a statement. I understand ODOT's concerns, particularly on Agnes, because anybody that's going northbound on Highway 213 and wants to access 205 southbound has to yield from local traffic that's coming out of there. And the development, we hope, is going to produce additional local traffic. And that's just not the best place for that local traffic to go. I don't know if there's been any major accidents there. If there haven't, it's probably because not much traffic comes out of there. But if we're going to do developments that are actually going to increase the residential or commercial use of that area, I can understand why ODOT would be concerned, and that's just a statement.
Commissioner Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, there's one other piece of it that I think I forgot, that the manager reminded me that one of the things that does come out of it, if the commission approves the agreement, ODOT has agreed to withdraw their appeal of the approval. So
It sounds like the agreement addresses what I mentioned.
yes.
Yeah, it does. The version that we just got handed, is that the 2-hour-ago version? So this is the final one that we'll be looking at this evening?
Unless I made some mistakes in the
Okay.
final typing, that
Okay,
should be the
thank
one
you.
you see this evening.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. The status of the Cove project, Mr. Patterson.
Probably the question that's on everyone's mind is, what is the status of the Cove project, given the fact that Kaiser has pulled the plug on it? And I'll take a page from Mr. Sullivan's book, and maybe it means nothing, or maybe it means everything. And let me just kind of walk through that right now. Civic Property Search is working to find another development component that fits in that. There are a number of options that exist that we could put together. We are meeting next week to discuss this and bring something forward. I think it comes down that if they find a similar use, then I think the pieces that have been put in place probably remain in place. If it is a significant change, I think you are going to have to look at modification to the development agreement. And if it is a big enough change, especially and depending on what the impacts, probably looking again at the land use approval. And depending on whatever's involved there and any impacts that a change may have in 99, we may be discussing more with ODOT as we go along there. The other question I think it comes up that you probably have is then, if that's the case, why are we coming to an agreement with ODOT at the present time, since we don't know what that future is? Why are we continuing to look at the funding? And I think it comes down, particularly if you look at the issue with the IGA that we have before you, is the Agnes Road issue has been an issue or a concern to ODOT for a considerable amount of time. And so no matter what we do, I think we need to resolve that, and so we're trying to move that one off the table. Likewise, with the financing, as you recall, the repayment of the $10 million that we're looking at in financing is not contingent upon any development at the Cove. It just comes strictly out of the urban renewal plan. So the fact that someone is willing to provide us a line of credit at this point, I think there's confidence in the urban renewals agency's ability to repay that. given the economic times, probably go ahead and good to secure that. You don't incur the debt unless you borrow against that line of credit. There are some costs for establishing that, and we'll be discussing that at the next meeting as well. But again, if we get all those pieces in place, if we can come up with the right project, I think, we've covered a lot of bases that were concerns and probably some of the reasons why Kaiser did pull the plug. I mean, as I've kind of mentioned to many of you, in these situations, when you get to that point, you've got to close the deal, and if you don't, you leave a lot of things open. It gives folks the room to make a different decision. In this case, it went the other way. The other question, if you don't spend any of that money, and let's say the Cove never goes forward, you still have other projects that we would redirect the Urban Renewal Commission's attention to and begin to try to put something together, again, using that same financing. So that's why we're still looking at those issues.
Okay, and I guess I did note that the revised agenda that we got doesn't show approval of minutes. Did we want to approve the February 4th amendments tonight?
I apologize for that.
Or should we hold for next meeting?
You can go ahead and approve those if you choose to.
Has everybody looked at the February 4th minutes? There's a motion from Commissioner Neely to approve. Second from Commissioner Crocker. The discussion? Are there any changes or corrections? We're ready to call for the vote.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
And Chair Slack?
Aye. Passes 8 in favor and 1 abstention. Larry, or Mr. Patterson, did you have a report in addition to, at the bottom of the agenda, we have city manager's report down there.
I have an explanation for you. I think I probably need to go through this evening, as I know that you have received some email in regards to a memorandum that our attorney, Ed Sullivan, had written, and there's some questions about why that was not forthcoming. And I just kind of want to walk through that and kind of explain what has transpired here. And Commissioner Nocita and I had a conversation earlier this afternoon about that. First question that comes up when you look at that is, how does staff present information to an Urban Renewal Commission? And it's our job to bring forth a recommendation to you on any particular action. Now, getting there is always kind of an interesting process, and from internal doings of the staff, any policy that we're formulating is open to debate and a lot of different opinions. And we try to work through those, try to raise the questions that are there, and then try to resolve those and bring those to you. And we're looking at things like, what are the city goals, what are we trying to do, what are the laws, rules, regulations, and how do we address those issues. The other question that kind of popped out then, okay, if that's the case, and if there are differences of opinion, why aren't those all brought to the city commission? And I think that probably speaks for itself. If we came in here with 10 talking heads, all with a different opinion, I think that would pretty well paralyze any decision that the city commission is going to make. It would also lead to a lot of confusion, and eventually it'd end up dividing the board as well. So that's why we come to that, and it's a question of priorities and the end result when it comes to what is the staff position. It's kind of what you pay me to do if we have a lot of differences. If those divisions are very deep and we can't resolve them, one of two things happen. Is we don't bring the issue to you until we get it resolved, or if it's still there, it's one of those things where, it really is just a big question and it's kind of a guess, we will present kind of here's some other views you may want to look at. That doesn't happen too frequently, but that would be one of the things that we'd bring to you. The question that comes up then is, why wasn't Mr. Sullivan's email brought to you? And again, you go back, Steve Janik is a special counsel to the Urban Renewal. Steve Janik is the attorney who has been working these agreements, and that's something that Ed had not been involved with, but as a matter, when we usually get those put together before we bring forward, Mr. Janik usually sends those over to Mr. Sullivan, and he looks through those. In this case, Mr. Sullivan did raise a number of questions, and when I got the email, I looked at it, it was pretty obvious that this is one of those things where there was some misunderstandings about what those agreements called for, and what it really called for at that time, as opposed to adding confusion to the Commission's agenda, is for Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Janik to get together and talk through those issues, and we arranged a meeting, and they did that. And so the memo that you saw is kind of a result of that, and if you go through that, you will notice there really was only one issue remaining after those discussions. It has to do on the competitive bidding process, and that's something that still needs to be worked out. The final question comes, was there information there that the Commission didn't receive? And if you go back and you look at the video streaming, both on the meeting of January the 21st and on February 4th, every question that was raised in that memo was addressed. And I do think the question that you and I were talking about in regards to Mr. Crocker's, that might have come up on the next, that meeting beyond the 4th. Maybe it was the 18th as I think back through that. But again, I think, and that had to do with the 15% on the resale of that. But those questions were all addressed. So there wasn't anything that any information did not come to the Commission. And again, I would encourage you to go back and look at Mr. Janik's explanation as well as some of my explanations on the meeting of the 21st. And I think if you look at the questions and you go through that, you'll find all of those answers were provided. So,
I assume if there were issues that came up in terms of discussions of Mr. Janik and Mr. Sullivan, then we would be apprised of what those issues would be.
yeah, if we had an issue that couldn't be resolved there, that was a legal issue, you would either be apprised of it, or we would have a roadblock that we'd have to figure out how we're going to resolve before we brought something to you. And again, the one issue that still remains out there that the attorneys are still looking at is this question about whether the Hughes construction contract can be exempted from public bidding. So, but a lot of that, till we really figure out what the development project is, we might be rethinking some of this anyhow. So.
I would like Mr. Patterson to share with us his good news.
Are you going to be a father?
Well, yeah, that's the. Hopefully, I've got the right bit of good news, and I think most of you have received that same email. I was notified this afternoon that the city will be the recipient of a little over $1 million in stimulus money for the Promenade project. So that should give us enough money. Should give us enough money to finish that project. And since we've got some stimulus dollars coming to Oregon City, I can quit holding my breath now. So.
Actually, we have three pieces coming, because we got stimulus money also for the intersections up on
Warner, Millie, and Molalla.
Yep.
Anything else from the Commission? If not,
Dave.
That's right. One other thing. I had that on the other agenda, which I need to. And you might want to think about this one for just a moment. Right now, the City Commission budget hearings are scheduled for the 21st, 22nd, and 28th. Last year, we held the urban renewal budget meeting on that last evening, and I would propose we do that again. I will indicate the budget will probably be a bit of a discussion this year, so I don't know if we'll be ready, but we might want to go ahead and schedule it for the evening of the 28th, if that works on everyone's calendar.
Is that April?
April, yes.
What are those 3 dates again?
The City Commission budget is 21st, 22nd, and, 20th, 21st. 20, 21, 28, and then we'd have the Urban Renewal Commission on the 28th. And then if you need additional meetings for any of those, you'd have to schedule them after that meeting.
Commissioner Walters?
Do you have an estimate as to how long we'll have to review the budget beforehand? Would it be possible for like at least a week?
Yeah, we'll try to get that
Great.
to you for that. I'm trying to think. Those usually come out when, Dave? City budget you have put together when?
It'll be in their hands a week or 10 days before.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
Any other questions? Commissioner Crocker.
This is separate. I'd like to add this to the future agenda. Everyone on the Urban Renewal Commission board right now, except for 3, came onto this board after the fact that all these things have been moving forward, and we've kind of just jumped on. I'd really like for us to be able to have some time to do some big picture thinking about what we would like to see this money spent on for urban renewal, be it the downtown core or 7th Street or Washington or whatever it is inside the urban renewal district. I think we've been so caught up in this whirlwind of the Cove and the rivers and all this stuff that I'd really like for us as a relatively young new body to be able to take some time to really do some brainstorming and think about what's the best and highest use of the urban renewal funds.
Commissioner Neely.
Oh, I think you're quite right. And you said a lot of these things have been in there. That was real good news on the promenade. I think that was put on the project while you were mayor, Dan Powers. So we're talking about we're talking about a long, long time. I mean, there had been work done on the promenade through the Urban Renewal Agency, but it was a piecemeal thing, and this is really great news.
Commissioner Smith.
And it also would reduce the amount of monies the Urban Renewal Agency would have to put out on that project.
Commissioner Norris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think it'd be fun. We'll see. Let me mention on that, I think since and we can probably do both of these at the same time, if you are agreeable to maybe, as opposed to a work session, that maybe we just have an urban renewal retreat. Because I think to work through those issues may take a little bit more than a couple of hours.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Commissioner Norris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I was going to suggest, is that the executive committee maybe look at some dates and some times, and that we kind of propose a schedule next time to all of us. Maybe we can look at the year and parcel out when our meetings are going to be. Also, toward that end, the budget committee of the Urban Renewal Commission is made up of us plus an equal number of citizens. We do not have all the citizens. We will bring the city commission budget members, so that's 5, but we still have the rest. So I don't have all the slots filled, so if anyone would like to serve for one day to review the urban renewal budget, please submit an application.
Okay. Anything else? Meeting is adjourned.